Hello, friends. I'm Todd Aaron Smith, and I am so glad you're here. Hey, I had an idea to make a drawing of a dinosaur. When I was younger, I loved dinosaurs, and I thought about what it would have been like to live when they lived. I looked at paintings and drawings of them in books and read about them. Maybe you did that too. Dinosaurs didn't take any pictures of each other, and I don't think they took any selfies, so all of the images that I saw were illustrations by other artists. Well, now I'm one of those artists and I can make my own pictures. And so can you. Dinosaurs were such amazing creatures. Let's draw one. As always, I want to start off very lightly with my sketching. I want to kind of block in the drawing before I go any further with it so that I can be kind of thinking on the paper as I go. I want to block in where my dinosaur is going to be. I want to figure out how big he's going to be, and even some basic form. Lots of times I talk about finding a horizon line and drawing everything based on the horizon line, but in this case, the horizon line is going to be below the sketch itself, and we're making this one as if we are looking up at something higher than our viewpoint, so there isn't going to be any horizon line in this one in particular. Many of the drawings I have made have had a huge amount of depth in them. I'm always talking about trying to make them 3D if I can and push things back in the distance and have things up closer in the picture. But this one in particular will have less depth than many of the other drawings that I've done, but I'm doing that on purpose this time. I like the idea of making a sketch with as much depth as I can, but what I want to do here is to make a dynamic sketch without as much distance in the background. I want this dinosaur that I'm going to sketch surrounded by trees, as if maybe I'm in the woods and suddenly this huge dinosaur comes roaring out through the woods at me. Can you imagine what that would have been like? I had the chance to see one of the biggest Tyrannosaurus Rex skeletons ever found. I got to see it in a museum a few years back, and it was just breathtakingly impressive, just absolutely glorious. From its nose to its tail, it was 45 feet long. 45 feet long. The average school bus is 30 feet. Imagine a creature the size of a school bus plus 15 more feet. That's how big these dinosaurs could get. It was just amazing. I had to look that up, by the way. I wasn't sure how long a school bus was, and it is average 30 feet. So this dinosaur was 45 feet, quite a bit bigger. I always mention creating interesting compositions. This one, if I do it right, will be as if we were standing there looking up at this impressive creature. I'm going to try and use a lot of shadows and highlights later on in the background, rather than to meticulously draw a bunch of trees behind my dinosaur. It's easy to do that, and it's a great effect, and it makes your eyes go right to the thing that you want eyes to go to in the drawing. You want people to look at your dinosaur right away, and that's exactly the effect that we're going to get. The trees are going to be more of a texture that highlights the dinosaur so that our eyes are drawn immediately to where we want them. I talk about drawing trees as textures quite a bit, and that's really the way that they should be. You don't want to draw individual leaves or pine needles or anything like that. You just want them to be a texture that's in the background in this case. I started off using my Mephisto mechanical pencil. That one is just a wonderful, wonderful pencil that I found. Actually, somebody gave it to me. I'd been looking for a great pencil like that one, and I just couldn't find one. I went to art supply stores, and I went to office supply stores and used all kinds of different things, and just never found one that I liked that much. And I guess I hadn't used the Mephisto, and somebody gave it to me and said, "Here, try this one out, see what you think about this one." And I used it, and it was beyond belief. It's not an exaggeration to tell you that I think it's probably the best pencil I've ever held in my hand. I keep a couple of them around, and I take one with me everywhere I go. I just do a ton of sketching with that pencil. Um, I can't say enough good things about it. The one that I'm using right now, though, is called Aquarelle. It's found in a set called the Gioconda set by Koh-I-Noor. And that set in particular has several different drawing tools in it. Absolutely wonderful set. You know, when I first got that set and opened up the lid, it was like Christmas. It was just such a nice set of drawing materials, and I use them all the time, and I just love that set. So this pencil now that I'm using is one of those. It's a heavier, darker lead than the Mephisto mechanical pencil. Like I said, I use that Mephisto to do all of my basic sketching. I do that all the time with that pencil. You can get a nice light lead in there, and just the feel of making light sketches and finding where everything's going to be with that pencil is just a great thing. And then after that, of course, I want to use the pencil that I'm using now, the Aquarelle, because it's darker and softer and can give you a much bolder line, I guess, than the Mephisto does. And it's just a wonderful thing to have in my hand to draw with. Art supplies, there's a big variety of them, and there's lots of supplies that are really good and lots of them that aren't quite so good. But these that I'm using now, I have found are the best ones that you can get. And I think they make a big difference in my drawings. You can make good drawings with other pencils. I'm not saying that you can't. Certainly you can make some really great artwork with all kinds of drawing materials. But I think it makes a big difference if you're using some really good drawing materials, and that's what I'm doing here. I've been working as an artist for many years. I worked on animated cartoons for television programs, and then I moved on to create licensed art for comic books and movies and television companies. And then I began to do illustration work for Major League Baseball, trading cards, working for the biggest baseball card company in the entire country. During that time, 3 of my pieces of artwork were voted into the permanent collection of the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum in Cooperstown, New York. So I have quite a resume over many years of being a professional artist. And I've used materials from pretty much every art supply company that exists. And I can tell you, good art supplies do make a difference. And that's why I use the ones that I do. And I'm glad to tell you about them. These Mephisto pencils, by the way, you can get them in 2 different lead sizes. You can get them in 0.5 and 0.7 leads. The one I use is 0.5, and I just love it, but they're both good pencils. The weight and balance of those are really better than any that I've ever used before. So I'm just blocking in now, making some shadows and some highlights on my Dinosaur. I think I'm just trying to figure out what the anatomy of this creature may have been like. I've never seen a dinosaur before, and nobody has either. We just have some evidence in museums, bones, and so forth. But what do we really know about dinosaur anatomy? Well, we know several things. We know what their bone structure looked like, so we can make some pretty good guesses about their muscle structure. They seem to have many similarities to modern lizards, so you can figure out a lot of things that way. They even have some similarities to birds. Have you ever heard about that? There seems to be some good evidence that many of them had feathers, for instance. Their joints were similar to bird joints. They had hollow bones like birds do, and many of them even had claws like birds do. So there are some things that we can reason out just by studying the evidence about the way that they looked and lived. In this case, I don't feel like I have to be a scientist to draw a dinosaur. I just draw whatever looks good to me. And if it's accurate, that's great. If it's not accurate, well, I'm really okay with that too. I'm making a fun sketch for me. I'm not illustrating a scientific textbook on dinosaur anatomy. I don't really know dinosaur anatomy. I'm just drawing because I love to draw. So if anybody ever tells you that your dinosaur doesn't look like a dinosaur, ask them how they know that exactly. You might even enjoy sketching creatures that never existed at all. Or you might be able to turn a drawing of a dinosaur like this into a dragon. Shouldn't be too far away to draw a dragon from a dinosaur. You can just use your imagination and make up a creature all on your own, one that nobody has ever seen, one that doesn't even exist. You just made it up, and you can do that. You can be a free thinker when you're sketching, and you can draw whatever you dream of. So I'm just making some places where I think there may have been muscles under the skin and just drawing with shadows and highlights. And that really is the key to drawing realistically, is to make your basic forms first. And everything, of course, is made out of basic shapes. So you put those together, and then when you do your shading and your highlights on them, that's what gives it depth. Artists have been saying that since the Renaissance period, and they're still saying that today. You could have very flat shapes, or you could have ones that have shadows and highlights. And when you do shadows and highlights, it makes it look like it's more of a rounded form instead of just a flat cutout shape. And as you can see here on my dinosaur all over the place, I have all these big shadows. So the light is hitting him from the top and creating shadows down below. I'm going to put more on him later, but I think I'm going to begin doing a little bit of background here. I'm going to put a big tree right directly behind him where he's just now stepped out from around there. And I'm kind of blocking in with these straight lines where I think other trees probably live. I'm just going to scribble a little bit here. I'm just filling in a little bit of dark tone. That's something you can do. Just be free and draw whatever feels good. And so I'm just going to scribble a little bit of this, and I'm going to make something out of it coming up in a minute, and I'll show you how that works. But this is just an area of where there's going to be trees. I'm going to make some straight lines that represent where I think there's going to be some trees. Of course, I can always change my mind about that if I want. That's a great thing about drawing, too. You can do it however you want, but you can change your mind, too, about halfway through and just make something else. So I'm going to make some tone here in the background. I think quite a bit of my background is probably going to have a lot of tone to it. Like I said, I want to make it look like he's in the forest and coming out of the trees. And so I'm going to lay down quite a bit of tone here, and then I'm going to play with some shadows and highlights and make my entire background be pretty much nothing but shadows and highlights. It's almost like drawing with only shadows and highlights and not making an awful lot of structure in there. And you'll see kind of how I'm doing that as I go here. I'm going to make some darker forms up here at the top as I go around the dinosaur's head. As we're looking up at him, of course, what we're seeing is more of treetops instead of the bases of the trees. And so up above him, I think I'm just going to spread out some of this tone that I'm putting down as if these are kind of the tops of the trees. And I'm going to blend these out in a little bit. I'll show you that too, and show you how you can make this a little bit more of a 3D looking sketch as you go through it. This is feeling pretty good to me here. Just laying down some random shapes. No rhyme or reason to it very much. Let's put some darker stuff in here. And just make it up as you go. Just be loose and free. Be a free-thinking drawer. Do you know what a free thinker is, by the way? Well, in this case, what I'm talking about is a person who forms their own opinions and thoughts independent of what anybody else thinks or says or does. They generally avoid mindlessly listening to other people and have little interest in what is going along with whatever everybody else is saying just because they said it. But a free thinker will evaluate any given situation and come up with their own conclusions. I guess we could also use the term creative thinker, but I kind of like to say free thinker because it implies very simply that I'm free to think. And so often when I'm sketching, I am literally thinking on paper as I go. I'm thinking, I wonder what it would be like if I did this, or I wonder what it would be like if I did that, or how would this look if I did it this way? So I'm literally thinking as I'm sketching. And that's one of the reasons that I carry around a sketchbook with me a lot, because at just about any time I can open it and sketch my thoughts in this book, and I can quickly draw whatever creative idea I might have. And so that's what a free-thinking sketch artist is. I'm going to take this napkin now that I've gotten this background stuff done. I took a napkin and just wrapped it around one finger and kind of brought it to a point, as you saw. And I'm now literally just smudging the pencil that I just laid down. Going back into the background and blending that out with this paper towel. The sketch pad that I'm using allows for you to do that very well, and this Gioconda pencil, the Aquarelle pencil, it blends extremely, extremely well. And so just by taking just a simple paper towel, you can really blend this out and do some fun things. And when you see how this looks when I get done with this, you're going to see the huge difference that this has made in the sketch. It's going to be pretty amazing. So I'm going to get all the stuff back here in the background, kind of being careful to go around the dinosaur sketch because I don't want to go into him too much. I will do it here on purpose in just a minute, but as I'm doing the background stuff, I want to be careful to just continue doing that background as I'm doing now, and not get into smudging the dinosaur, because if I get into smudging the dinosaur, then I have to kind of recreate him or erase some of the stuff, and I don't really want to do that. I just want to keep on sketching and keep on creating, so I'm going to be fairly careful with only doing the background at this point. And like I said, coming up again, I'll show you some other stuff that you can do. So I'm just finishing that up here, going back and forth to some places that I see where it might need a little bit more blending. This stuff blends so well. I can't even believe how well this stuff blends. There's what it looks like on the napkin. Just literally lifts the pencil off of the paper. I've just now moved it so that I'm working with a clean piece of the napkin. And I'm going to go into my dinosaur here and just kind of go over a few of the areas that have some of the bigger shading on them. I'm not going to go over all of them, but a few of the areas where there's some bigger spaces of shading, I'm going to go over them and just try to smooth them out a little bit by blending them. And then I'm going to go and put some more texture on them here in a minute. The things that are in your foreground in your sketches should have more detail to them, and the things that are in the background should have less detail on them. And that's just the way things are. When you look off in the distance at things, the things that are right up close to you, you can see tons more detail on them, and that's what makes them look closer. They are in fact closer. Okay, so now I'm going to use my woodless graphite pencil. It's the third pencil and the last one that I will use in this particular sketch. I love using a couple of different pencils to make these. A woodless graphite, though, is a pretty amazing pencil. They come in 2B, 4B, 6B, 8B. There are several different ones. And I think the one that I'm using right now is a 4B. It puts down a wonderful, wonderful dark tone over my shadows, and so I want to use that one to go in and really punch those shadows out and make my dinosaur look like he's out in the foreground. A lot of people, when they're making these drawings, will get to the point just before where I just now did and call it done, and they'll say, this is the end of this drawing and I'm going to make another one. But I really think that if you would just take time, if they would just take a few minutes to go back over some of their shadows and highlights and punch them out a little bit further, I think they would be surprised at how much of a difference that makes to their drawing. I really feel like when people are drawing, they just give up too soon, and they don't take it all the way to where it's a finished drawing. And it would only take a couple of minutes to make the drawing that much better by going in and just highlighting some of the shadows and so that's what I'm doing here. I'm just going across. I'm not going to go over every line that I've drawn, and certainly not every shadow, but I'm just going to find those places where I think the shadows might be the deepest and make those a little bit darker. There are a few places where I'm just adding something that wasn't there before, but that's okay. I mean, you can do whatever you want to do. You're free to think about it and just sketch whatever seems right to you. And I'm going to go over some of these places where the shadows need to be a little bit heavier. And it's looking pretty good to me. I think we don't have very much further to go on this guy. It's coming along, and just want to really punch out these arms here. But what you can notice is how much this dinosaur stands out from the background now. I mean, he really looks like he's in front of a background. And if you just look at the entire thing at once, it looks like that background is pretty far back and that the foreground is right there in front of you. And of course, we did that by making the details and the lines much sharper in the things that are in the foreground, which in other words, of course, is the dinosaur. And making the trees be much further back in the distance by blending them and not having very much detail in them at all. I'm going to show you a trick here coming up in just a second where you can make your background even better. It's already pretty fun, but you can do something with it that's even more fun. I'm just doing a couple of little tiny details here that my eyes are kind of going to and making me think I need to straighten them up. Let me show you something. This is my kneaded eraser. Kneaded, kneaded eraser. Here's what it looks like in the package unopened. I've got an unopened one here. But this is the eraser, and you can form it however you want. So what I do here is I squeeze it together and I make a nice hard chiseled edge that's very thin, and then I can draw with it. And what I'm doing is I'm just bringing out some places in my background that look like they have highlights. There's another tree right there, so those are the highlights of that tree. And just take a look at that. See how they look like they're trees with highlights and shadows on them now? And I didn't even draw that. The only thing I did was lifted up some of the pencil that I had already put down with my kneaded eraser. And I'm going around to where there's leaves and branches and different things, and I'm doing the exact same thing. Just pulling up a bit of that pencil that we've already put down. And I think it's going to make a huge difference in the way that this looks. It already makes a huge difference in the way that it looks. So that is a trick for you for drawing highlights on things in the background. And I'll even do it in the foreground coming up. I'll go ahead and put some highlights on my dinosaur in the foreground as we go. So that's a fun trick that you can use with a kneaded eraser. That comes in the Gioconda set as well, but it's in other places too. You can get that kneaded eraser. And I highly recommend it. It's a great tool. I don't do a lot of erasing of my drawings, but for making things like highlights, boy, it's just a great tool, a great extra thing that you can do. Here's another idea for you. You should draw what you love. And that may sound like a silly thing to say, but here's the thing. As an artist, I've had to make illustrations of many things that I didn't feel any kind of a connection to. I've had to draw things that were clearly not on my list of things that I would ever want to draw for myself. But a job is a job, and sometimes that's what you have to do. So, for instance, I have sketched a few thousand trading cards for various well-known properties. Sometimes it was for a TV show or for a movie that I hadn't even seen before. I had no connection at all to those characters. In fact, I barely knew who they were. I had to look them up when I heard their names because I didn't even know who the characters were. But the good thing that happened from drawing those characters that I didn't know was that when I got the opportunity to draw baseball cards, then I had this huge portfolio of work that I had done with other characters, and I could show that I could make good illustrations, and that's the good that came out of that. And so I was able to draw the baseball cards because I proved that I could draw these characters. But that isn't the kind of sketching that we're talking about here with our sketching. The sketching we're doing here is just for ourselves. We do it because we love sketching. If you like monsters and aliens, you should draw monsters and aliens. If you like comic book characters, draw comic book characters. If you like cats, draw cats. If you're interested in fast cars, draw fast cars. Everybody has the thing that interests them more than other things, and so draw those things. It will make you happy, and it will be much more rewarding. So that's how to draw a dinosaur. As it is with all creatures living today, there was an amazing amount of diversity in the dinosaur world. They came in different colors, different sizes, different shapes. They had different abilities, but every one of them was a magnificent creature. If your dinosaur drawing doesn't look exactly like mine, that's okay. I've never seen a dinosaur, and neither has anybody else. You can see dinosaur skeletons in museums, and we do have some evidence of how they may have looked. But my point is, draw because you love to draw, and don't be too concerned about how it turns out. It's your drawing. You can be creative with it because you are an artist. See you next time.